Hello everyone, welcome to another podcast. Today's episode 20 with Kingston, a chat about his broadcast career. So without further ado, here's episode 20 of the podcast radio show here on YouTube. Here we go, here's my interview with Kingston, here it is. Hello and welcome to another podcast. Here on the Ben Lister Podcast Radio Show. We are very nearly out of lockdown. It's 2021. Welcome back to the Ben Lister Podcast Radio Show here on Hull Kingston Radio 107.4 FM. I have had so many different guests from the world of radio and the music industry over the last 19 episodes, and episode 20 is no different. Today's guest is... It is broadcasting icon and another broadcasting hero of man, a broadcasting god. Welcome along to Hull Kingston Radio 107.4 FM, the legend that is, from Radio Air and many other different radio stations. It's the one, the only, Carl Kingston. Hello, Carl. Welcome.
Hello,
along.
Ben. Nice to be here. Wow, that was an amazing introduction. Thank you very much. I think I've gone red. If it was television, I've gone red.
I've had so many different guests on this podcast.
I could imagine over the years. I've heard some of them, obviously.
My first one of the year was a friend of yours, Stephanie Hurst.
Yeah, absolutely. Known Steph since, crikey, about 13 years old.
Wow, long time then.
A real long time.
And I've also...
She's 105 years old now.
And yeah, I've also... had lots of big guests like Bruno Brooks a few weeks ago as well.
Yeah, who I worked with at Radio Air as well. And prior to Bruno coming to Radio Air, I'd done some gigs with him in London.
Wow, that's all good. Anyway, how are you today?
Very good. Life is good. Very busy. Enjoying life.
That's good. 5 questions about your broadcast career, if that's okay.
Absolutely, fire away.
Let's go for it, shall we? Question 1. Where did you start your broadcast career?
Well, I started my broadcast career, I suppose a background to my broadcast career, basically was that from the age of 9, I was crazy for music and for radio. My grandparents in Hull had Rediffusion. People in Hull will know what Rediffusion was. It was like a cable feed into your house on your television, and you had radio channels. So you had the national BBC, and I would spend all my time listening to the Light programme, as it was way back in those days. And my grandparents would get the Radio Times, and I would read all the articles and the little features about the pop music programmes that were on. So that was very early, from like age 9. At age 12, everything changed. My grandmother bought me a transistor radio. I always remember the brand was Juliet, a Juliet transistor radio, which meant that my world opened up as regards radio. And instead of just hearing the BBC, I found Radio 270 broadcasting off the coast of Scarborough and Bridlington. So I was a constant listener to Radio 270, and at age 12, I decided that was exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a DJ. I listened to 270, to Radio Caroline, to Big L, Swinging Radio England, all the pirates, in fact. And I decided, this is what I want to do. So that was at age 12. How did I do it? Well, just before my 16th birthday, I decided to start a mobile disco. So I started a mobile disco with a friend from Hull. And from that, I literally went from mobile discos to clubs. Then I was working at a club called Scamps in Hull, and a producer from BBC Radio Humberside, Barry Stockdale, he came into the club unbeknown to me, and he left a message with the manager saying, can you ask your DJ Carl to get in touch with me? So I'd actually just been down to London, and I'd made a demo tape for radio, thinking that I'd love to try and get into radio. So I contacted Barry, and I went to meet him, and obviously he said, there's not exactly any shows. You can't just walk in and do shows, but we have a few things you could maybe do. So I started off at BBC Humberside doing things like book reviews, album reviews, things like that. And then I ended up doing a segment on BBC Radio Humberside, which was a top 5 chart which was part of Dave Sanders' show. So the last 15 minutes were me doing the local top 5, which I really enjoyed. And from that, I ended up doing other programs. I'm trying to remember the names of some of the shows, like request shows from Me to You and things like that. And I went on a BBC SA course, a station assistant course. Why on earth I said I would do that, I've got no idea, because I was still DJing in the evening. And I was doing 6 nights a week in clubs. And then I got asked if I would go to this course. So I went on this course, which was early in the morning, getting up so early and going into BBC Radio Homicide and learning how to connect to the different regional studios, etc., etc. And it just wasn't for me. And I distinctly remember, I lived with my grandparents, and I distinctly remember waking up in a freezing cold bath, looking at my watch, and it was like 5 o'clock, and I thought, is it 5 o'clock in the morning? Is it 5 o'clock at night? I had absolutely no idea. I was so physically tired. So I went to my grand's room, knocked on the door and said, is it 5 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock at night? And she said, it's 5 in the morning. I said, I can't go into homicide. I've got to go to bed. Give them a call for me and tell them that I can't come in, but I'll call later. So I ended up sleeping. And then I telephoned and I said, look, this SA course is not for me, this station assistant course. It's not what I want to do. And I always remember Barry said to me, well, exactly what is it that you want to do? I said, I just want to be on the air. I want to be a DJ. And he said, well, what'll happen with that? And I just continued my career and have been very lucky in the industry and worked for a lot of radio stations. So that's how it started.
Brilliant way to start your career.
Great days, great days. I love being at Radio Homicide. I love being on the air. That's what I like to do. Very much I enjoy now I enjoy the technical side, like plugging up studios and building studios and things like that. So I really enjoy that. But at the start of my career, I didn't want to spend my time doing that. I was more interested in developing my skills as a DJ or a presenter, as people used to call us in the early days. But I'm proud to be a DJ. I am a DJ, and I'm very proud of it.
Brilliant. Yeah. Question 2. Who were your inspirations in radio when you were starting out?
My inspirations in radio when I was starting out, my all-time favourite DJ is Johnny Walker, who, of course, was at Radio Caroline and later went on to National BBC Radio 1 and went to America to work for KSAN, then came back to the UK, back to Radio 1, and is now still on Radio 2. He's my absolute favourite broadcaster. I'm also a big fan of another DJ called Mark Wesley, who was on Radio North Sea International. He was also on Radio 270 off Scarborough as well, and he worked for Radio Scotland and lots of commercial radio stations, and he went to Radio Luxembourg as well and had a very successful career at Radio Luxembourg. He's now a writer and a kind of film producer, a very, very talented guy, but he's written a couple of great books, and he still remains, in my opinion, a wonderful broadcaster. So those two as such were my big heroes. And also a guy called Crispy in St. John, Jay Jackson, who worked at, he ended up coming, I worked with him originally in 1977 on a radio station from a ship called The Voice of Peace in Israel. And I worked with him at Radio Caroline, the relaunched Radio Caroline in the 80s. And then Jay came to live with my ex-wife and I, Sue, in Hull, and he got work with Viking and Viking Gold, and he did a show called, what was it called, Pirate Gold, something like that, and also at Radio Air as well. Then he started a trade magazine. It was called Now Radio. And he started that in my house at Chandler's Avenue with my typewriter. And that's how that magazine started. Later became the radio magazine. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, which was a great loss, but he was also a big inspiration for me.
Yeah, and also your good friend as well, Peter Tate as well. Because James Whale and Stephanie Hurst, when I was listening to their interview, said you looked after Peter Tate in his final years.
Absolutely. At the very end, my ex-wife Sue and I, we were part of the care team for Peter. And, when Peter was ill with his brain tumour, I filled in for him on his breakfast show. And then straight after the breakfast show, I went to his house to do kind of my shift. My first job was to get him a sausage sandwich and then be with him through the course of a day till the next person came, so many hours later. So I kind of cleared my, I still did my gigs. I still did my own shows at the weekend, but I did his breakfast show 5 days a week. And I cancelled all my voiceover work because I wasn't available to do that. So I was literally with Peter right through until the very sad end. I met Peter actually through an advert. I'd gone to work in America, and I put an advert. Prior to going to the States. I'd put an advert in a trade paper, and he contacted me, and we made friends that way. And later, he suddenly called me. There's a story for you. He called me and he said, a friend of mine, Dale, which was Dale Winton, he said, Dale's been offered a job on the new Radio Caroline, but he doesn't want to go. But he said, I'm going to go. He said, would you be interested to go to Radio Caroline? And I thought about it at the time. I'm trying to think where I was at the time. I've forgotten exactly who I was working for at the time. I was doing voiceovers, lots of voiceovers and lots of gigs. And I said, yeah, of course I'd like to go. He said, well, you'd have to make a tape really quick and send it express delivery to my house, and I will give it to the program controller. And the program controller at the time, looking after the station, was a lady called Annie Chalice, and she was Rod Stewart's manager as well. So I made that particular tape at a studio in Hull, and I made it at Wyke Farmer Productions. And I quickly sent that reel-to-reel little recording to Peter. He took it down to Caroline. And before he went on the ship, he gave it to Andy Chalice, who subsequently called me. And then I joined Radio Caroline. And that was prior to going back to Radio Humberside later. But Peter was responsible for me going to Radio Caroline. So we became great friends. And I was at Caroline, and I was hoping to join Viking Radio, but they hadn't decided if they were going to broadcast late in the evening. So it was a case of Dave Jensen, who was the program controller. He said to me, well, look, we want to use you. We want to give you something, but we don't know if we're going to close at 6 o'clock at night or midnight. We've no idea. So I said, right, okay, I'll just stay at Caroline. So I stayed at Caroline. Then out of the blue, I got a call from Barry Stockdale at BBC Radio Humberside, who said, I've got 5 shows a week if you're interested in doing them, if you want to leave Caroline. And I said, I'm talking to Viking. I was absolutely honest. I said, I'm talking to Viking at the moment, but I don't know what's happening with them. I just don't know what to do. He said, well, our offer is on the table. You can sign a contract straight away. So I called Dave Jameson and I said, look, I've got this offer from Humberside. And he said, if you've got a concrete offer, he said, then I would take it. So that's what I did. I gave my notice at Caroline, came back to Hull, and I joined BBC Radio Humberside. But then, on the morning of Viking, if you hear any tapes of Viking when it started with Dave Fuster on The Breakfast Show, there are all the commercials that are running. But I was on so many of the commercials because I was making a lot of my living out of voicing radio ads. So I was on so many commercials, and I was sitting at a desk at Radio Humberside later in the afternoon, and Barry Stockdale just pops his head round and he says, hello, Carl, heard you this morning on Viking. He said, I heard you more than Dave Fuster. He said, I thought you were actually doing the breakfast show. I thought you were the DJ. And I said, oh, it's just another part of my work, Barry, just another part of my work.
Brilliant. And also, as you say, also as you say, there's a lot of great legends that have come through the Viking. Was that David Jensen who was on Radio 1? Kid Jensen, as he was known.
I can't remember. Was Kid Jensen Viking doing? You're probably thinking of syndicated shows for commercial radio when he didn't he do the Nescafe chart or something like that? Yeah, from memory. I should know because I interviewed David Jensen in London at the Hippodrome for Tony Prince's. I went down for Tony Prince's Disco Mix Club event at the Hippodrome, and David Jensen was one of the people that I interviewed. Yeah, it was. He was on Viking because he was doing the Nescafe chart show at the time.
And also, as well, you should get James Whale to do his top 5 one day.
Absolutely. That's a very good idea, Ben. I think I will contact James because I'm on the air in Leeds 5 days a week for LDC 97.8 FM, and I have a feature on a Sunday where I have a Leeds DJ, either a club DJ or a radio DJ, it doesn't really matter, but they play their top 5 dance records. And of course, I'm sure you know that James Whale started Radio Top Shop in London, and he did do club gigs as well. So I must get in touch with James and ask him if he'll do that feature with me. Good idea.
Yeah, and you'll also have to get, because Leeds viewers, because I know Stephanie Hurst wasn't from Leeds, but she is a Leeds DJ at heart.
Absolutely. Steph started helping me at Radio Air age 13. And, we've been in touch ever since. And, close friends. So it is my intention to ask Steph to come on as well, because Steph was at Galaxy in Leeds. And Galaxy being a dance station, it'll be interesting to know what her top 5 songs are. So that will make a nice little feature. And, of course, she does the Kitchen Belters program as well from home. So she's still very much involved with club music and involved with clubs as well.
And she also does the Belters Extra as well.
Correct. So, very busy, within dance music itself. So it's a good idea. I'll get Steph on. You should be my producer.
I don't know about that. I'm currently just busy at Hull Kingston Radio, but I am planning in a few months to syndicate a couple of shows for a few stations in the other regions of England.
Good idea. Best of luck with that.
Thank you. And also, yeah, as I say, and also a good name on it as well would be either, I know they worked for Radio Air in the past, JK or Joel would be a good one as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Another 2 very well-known broadcasters. So there are a lot of people. I mean, there are 52 weeks of the year, so I got 52 broadcasters and DJs to look for to do that top 5 feature.
Yeah, as I say, you'll have to get James Whale and Stephanie Hurst on soon.
Maybe together.
Yeah, because they have interviewed each other together, and they did mention the late great Dale Winton as well when he came over for Peter Tate's funeral.
Absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned about Radio Caroline, Peter had told me about Dale at the time. The name Dale Winton didn't mean anything to me, but Peter and I worked at radio. Peter was responsible for getting me my gig at Radio Air. What happened with Humberside, if we go back to that, was there was the needle time restrictions, and my show came to an end at BBC Humberside, and I did my last show at Humberside on the Friday, and then I started at Viking on the Sunday, and I then started at Radio Air as well. So while I was at Viking, I was at Radio Air every week as well. So I was working with Peter Tate. And then what happened was, how did I come to leave Viking? Well, I got offered a job in America. So I went with my family to Sacramento in California, and I got a great club gig. And I got another Viking DJ, Mark Allen, who used to do drive time on Viking. I got Mark a job as well, so we both left, and I don't think management were too happy about that. So off I went to America, and I was in constant touch with Peter Tate. I got a job with an American station, but it's a long story, but I didn't have a proper green card for America. So I decided to return back to the UK, or I had planned to return to the UK. And Peter Tate called me and he said, I've been talking to Krista Ackroyd, and she said that if you come back to England, she's got 6 shows a week for you straight away. So that's exactly what I did. I came back to Hull, and I spent nearly 3 years commuting to Leeds for Radio Air, doing 6 shows a week. In the end, I did 7 shows a week because the 7th show paid for the petrol every day from Hull to Leeds and back. All my gigs ended up being in the Leeds area. And obviously working with Peter all the time, he was always talking about Dale Winton, and Dale's going to get into television and Dale's going to do this. And of course, Dale Winton did, God rest his soul, end up being a massive TV personality, but, sadly passed away as well. And as we mentioned earlier, Peter also got ill with a brain tumour and he passed away as well, which was very sad. But that was the start of my my career with Radio Air, and I stayed at Radio Air and Magic for like 23 consecutive years. And even though you would hear me on other stations like Minster FM, Alpha in Darlington, Home 107 in Huddersfield, and many, many other stations, I was always still at Radio Air 6 days a week. It was crazy. And I had some really strange times. And some weeks on air, you're going to ask me how I did it, but some weeks on Radio Air, I would do 15 shows a week on air. Plus, I was on all the other stations as well. So there was I did a lot of very early voice tracking, as we call it, and recording. So I became quite proficient at doing that, working at many, many stations. Radio Air sent me to the Superstation in London. So I went down to London every week. In fact, they didn't even ask me. They said, "Carl, we're sending you to the Superstation." I said, "Well, what about my soul show, my dance show on a Saturday that I love doing?" They said, "You'll have to record that." So I had to record that show every week. And I went to London and did 2 shows a week from Molyneux Studios in London. And that went out on about 27 stations around the UK. So that was very good for profile. It got me a lot of extra voiceover work as well. And that kind of, what should we say, enhanced my career, increased my profile. So from that, I got even more freelance work with other stations. I'd go down to Hereward Radio in Peterborough and things like that, and so many places. It was crazy. The programs for the Superstation came from Molyneux Studios in London, and then the studios changed, and the location became the old Piccadilly Radio Studios in the Piccadilly Piazza in Manchester. So that was much easier to go to Manchester twice a week than go all the way down to London every weekend. So I enjoyed doing that, but unfortunately the Superstation then came to an end. And as something finishes, something else starts. But all the time, I continued at Radio Air and Magic. After that period of time, I came back to Hull and I did one show only on Magic 1161. And that was quite amazing because I remember when I came to Magic to do this one show, I opened the microphone and I said, "You thought I was dead, but I'm not. I'm back." So I did this one show on Magic. And then later, obviously I came to KCFM in Hull and I worked with Tim Gibson and lots of other great friends and had a great time at KCFM. And then I ended up quitting. I ended up quitting all my radio work in England. Sadly, my marriage broke up. And I got the chance to return to Switzerland to DJ. And I actually recorded my Magic shows for Leeds. And I ended up just staying in Switzerland. And then I went to Lanzarote to DJ and came back from Lanzarote. And I did Pulse 2 in Bradford for Paul Carrington, who, of course, had been at Viking in Hull. And he asked me if I could do a couple of weeks on the breakfast show on Pulse in Bradford, Pulse 2. So I came over and did that. And it's kind of a crazy lifestyle that I've had and I continue to have. I'm always doing something somewhere.
I was also a few weeks ago, speaking to the brother of Derek Webster from Century. Called...
Yeah, that's somebody who I gave a job to on The Voice of Peace in Israel, possibly.
Jeff Webster
probably mentioned that. I forgot to mention that great thing. That's what happened. I went to work for the offshore commercial radio station, The Voice of Peace, and I became the UK representative for The Voice of Peace as well. So I gave a lot of people their first jobs in radio, which was great. I mean, that's how I met Jay Jackson originally. He was the program controller at The Voice of Peace. And he asked me, he would always give me the demo tapes and say, have a listen to these and see what you think. I said, you're the more experienced broadcaster. I was in the early days of my career. He said, oh, have a listen and tell me what you think, and then I'll tell you what I think. We hired a lot of people. He kind of very often left the decision to me. So when I came back from England from the Voice of Peace, I then became the UK representative for the Voice of Peace, and then I was officially recruiting broadcasters, and I gave so many people their first job in radio, which was something great to do. I enjoy seeing new talent and being able to be part of somebody's journey within the radio industry, and to see them develop and to go to great heights. Chris Moyles is a perfect example, and Stephanie Hurst. They were both what were called my helpers at Radio Air in the early days. They would go to the door and bring in studio guests, and they would make tea. They would write and fill out my PRS logs for music. They'd make my jingles. They'd do everything. Do you know what I mean? But from doing that, you can identify people that have a talent, and you know that they're going to do well. And I knew that both of them would do really, really well. And of course, yeah, they have.
Who was your producer at the time?
I didn't have a producer at. I'm trying to think. I've never had a producer as such. I've had because I did the evening show at Radio Air. I had so many interviews, and we were playing vinyl. And Krista Ackroyd, who you obviously know from television as well as radio, I said, Krista, is there any chance that I could have like an intern, somebody who can come in on an evening and help me on the show and assist with things? And she said, yeah, I understand. I said, I'm playing songs, and, I've got to run to the door. I don't want somebody in the studio with me for 40 minutes before I start an interview, because in conversation, it will literally be as if I've already asked them all the questions before we do the interview. I said, so I need somebody who can sit them down, make them feel welcome, have a cup of tea. I said, and those people, they'll obviously be interested in radio. So my part will be, in return for them coming in and doing things, I will teach them to edit. I'll teach them how to use the desk. And a lot of those people, other people who maybe didn't make it as broadcasters, they ended up working as technical operators and became very, very skilled in the technical side of things, and are still in the industry today. But as such a producer, I never really had a producer in commercial radio. I had a producer. Barry Stockdale was my producer at BBC Radio Humberside. I suppose I must clarify that. When I took over from Tim Gibson doing the Electric Wireless show, and Barry was my producer for that. But I had to come up with the template for what I wanted to do on the show, and then he would oversee everything. So that was my kind of only experience of having a producer in radio. And then I'm going to correct myself again, because something I forgot to mention is that I went to work short-term contracts for the Österreichische Rundfunk, which is the ORF, which is the equivalent of the BBC in Austria, in Vienna. So I went to Vienna a number of times, quite a few times, and did short-term contracts. And you had a producer for the afternoon show, the like midday magazine show. So I did have a producer for that, which was very, very interesting. And for doing that kind of work, I was more than a DJ. I love being a DJ and playing music. But for Blue Danube Radio, I was essentially a talker. So I would be interviewing people, and my producer would say to me, today, Carl, we have, the leader from the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra who's coming in, to chat with you. And I'd say, all right, okay. So I'd have to look at the biography and work out all my questions. And I got to interview people, lots and lots of people, and people from the world of arts and politics, all sorts of different things. You name it, I ended up doing interviews. And I really enjoyed that side of radio. But we did 2 shows a week at Blue Danube, 2 shows a day. And I did the breakfast show, which I loved because that was more a fast-moving music show. Midday magazine show was interviews and listener calls, listeners who were calling in to sell things, like a tradio type thing, Mrs. Jones is on the air from Vienna 3, and she's got a sideboard to sell, and I would interact with the callers. So I enjoyed that as well.
Brilliant. And Pete Mills as well, Before we go on to question 3, Pete Mills asked me to ask about the old KCFM curry nights.
Oh, the KCFM curry night. This is where I could probably get myself into trouble. No, I wouldn't get myself into trouble. I'm a little bit well known for blagging free food, and getting things delivered to radio stations. I just used to have this great curry company that would deliver fantastic curries to us, but they would send, I've forgotten the name of the company, it was on Holderness Road somewhere, and they would deliver these, this curry stuff, and it got to the stage where we could order whatever we wanted. So you'd find that there was, I'm trying to remember, what's the name of the guy who was the engineer? Ben was the engineer at KCFM, and he would come in. So we'd have a curry, then Pete Mills would come in, and before we knew where we were, there was about 6 of us, you know what I mean? So the order had gone to about 6 people, and Tim Gibson came to me and he said, Carl, he said, you're not in trouble, he said, but you'll have to stop this, mentioning all these curry places and all these different places. He said sales were listening, they thought it was a proper advert. They thought I was selling adverts, you know what I mean? It was quite funny. So we had some legendary curry nights.
And you also forgot to mention as well someone...
Say that again?
You forgot to mention as well someone who's mentored by Stephanie Hurst now, Rosie Madison.
Oh, yeah, Rosie, of course, was at Viking as well. So, I know Danny Milo.
And she was
and
at
Rosie
as well.
I later, in 2018, I went to work for... on a number of freelance projects. I went as technical support. I mentioned earlier that I do like the technical side of things. And I went to work as tech support for Tim Gibson's company, Adventures in Radio. And I went to Dubai, Toronto, Canada, Barbados, Jamaica, and here in Switzerland. I went to... I did broadcast, setting up the equipment for all the broadcasting. It was quite funny because loads of the stations, I knew people. And I would, I'd be working with colleagues. So, of course, Danny Milo was there and Rosie. They were there from Pulse. And many other people from Minster and different stations. And I was also working and recording shows for other stations while I was doing the technical support stuff. So that was quite funny. In fact, one time I remember distinctly, I was recording my links for a show for a DAB radio station that goes out in Birmingham and Manchester and Glasgow, and I was doing some links, and one of the jocks walked by and he said, I like that link, Carl, I'm going to steal that and use that. Then he went through, and then as I was walking past about 10 minutes later, seeing if everything was okay with this station, the other guy on the air, he uses one of my links, one of my funny little things that I'd said, and I just thought, yeah, that's great, that's flattery, funny.
And also, I was told that as well, if you've ever met Martin Kellner before.
Yes, I've met Martin just a couple of times, not massive times. But yes, I have met Martin, very nice guy.
And he's very funny on the radio, I've been told.
Very funny, yeah. One of the things that I like, I'm very proud of being a DJ. I like music radio. I'm in radio because I love music, not because... I like the sound of my own voice, but I like formatics of radio. I like the science behind radio. I like the communication, etc. So I appreciate all different types of broadcasters. I don't think that everybody should be like me, and I don't think that I should be like everybody else. So I have an appreciation for very, very different styles of broadcasting. So I admire many people that you probably might think, that I wouldn't. Radio 2, I think, is a fantastic station. It is the most successful station in the British Isles. Ken Bruce is a brilliant broadcaster. I like Jeremy Vine. I actually think he's a very good, host. He obviously is an ex-DJ in his early days. Still is a DJ as such, but he's known more for the talky bits that he does. I think he's very good. Dermot. I like Dermot on Radio 2 as well. And a lot of people just think of him as being a television person who is suddenly doing radio, but he's an ex-BBC person from the early days, and I like and enjoy his style. So I like many different types of broadcasters. I think Tony Blackburn is such a brilliant DJ as well. He's excellent.
And from what I can gather as well, Tony Blackburn has been on a lot of adventures. He's been drinking with Rosie and Milo in Barbados. And
yeah, Tony. I think Tony is a very sociable and personable person. I met him and spent more time with him at the radio festival in Switzerland, in Zurich, a number of years ago. And he was talking about his wife and his daughter and things like that. A real homely sort of guy, but an absolute lover of radio, and such a wonderful pedigree and such a wonderful history as a broadcaster. And he continues to give us very, very good, entertaining radio programs all the time. He's just so consistent. He's a very, very nice guy, and he's a great broadcaster.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, brilliant legend.
He's somebody who, the word legend is overused, in my opinion, to describe a lot of people, but it fits for him because he is truly a broadcast legend.
And also Jim Coulson says he can get away with stuff that nobody else can with his cheesy lines at every song.
Absolutely. He says the funniest things. I'm trying to remember this thing. It sticks in my mind, something he said on Radio 2. And it was something like, I was watching so-and-so program. He said, and I watched it. And he said at the end of it, he said, I had to say to my wife, I said, well, can you explain to me what it was all about? He said, because I've got absolutely no idea. But he watched something for about an hour. But it's just so true. It's just a human thing. And you remember things like that. And one of the things that I've always said to other broadcasters, it's very important to be technically very good at doing things. And, it's a great skill to be very slick and very, very tight, as we refer to working the panel, working the board. But nobody's ever going to come up to a DJ and say, I heard you do that segue on Wednesday. It was absolutely fantastic. And you dropped that jingle over the top and it went straight to the vocals. And it was absolutely brilliant. No ordinary listener is ever going to say that to you. And that hit home to me one time really strongly when I went into my local post office. And I went up to the counter, and the guy said to me, these were his words. He said, have you remembered it for today? And I looked at him and I thought, I've got no idea what's on there. So I said, remembered what? He said, I heard you on the radio the other day. You mentioned that your wife made you sandwiches and everything, and you left your lunchbox on the side at home. And you got to radio air and you're on the air and you've got absolutely nothing to eat. I said, oh, yeah, I definitely remembered them. But that made me think that listeners hear the human content and there's a connection with certain things that you say. And he just remembered that. He didn't say to me, you did a great segue the other day, Carl, and it was great the way that jingle dropped over everything. He just mentioned something totally simple that I said. And I've always thought that as well. I've always thought that personality in radio should not be perceived as being excess verbiage where you just talk a lot. That is not personality in every form. Personality can be the shortest 5-second link where you make a connection with listeners. It can be something very quick or very, very simple that you say, and that is a real connection. So again, my big thing is that excess verbiage should not be perceived as personality. And my other theory is that if you do a link that's longer, you make the next one shorter, because otherwise people think that you just go on and on and on. Okay, I'm talking a lot now because this is an interview, but if you were to make every link really, really long, I think it just goes over people's heads. So if you use that, I call it pepper and salting, the way you do a show, that you do a long link or a longer link, and then you make a short one, the next one, and then a little bit longer, the next one, and then the next one you can make a little bit longer. And that's my theory.
Yeah, and also Chris Miles, I remember. Have you seen any of his Radio X content? It was the one where he went on the mobility scooter around the Global building.
No, I haven't actually seen that. We did have, I found the other day the full-length version of the BBC came to Magic, and Chris came into my studio, and there's a piece where Chris and I are on together, and he's listening to an air check of himself, and he's saying, "Oh, yeah, I sound okay there," and then an American voiceover plays, and he goes, "I sound really good there." And of course, it was the American voiceover doing the ID. He says, "I sound really good there. I sound really butch." But no, I haven't seen what you mentioned. But he's a funny guy. He's very funny. I mean, Chris used to carry my records to my gigs. I mean, he was my helper as well. And he'll tell you, he used to carry my flight cases to gigs. I'd be working all around the country. And he would go with me to all different cities, and he would literally carry my cases up flights of stairs, which I felt really bad for because he was too young to get in anyway. But he used to like it, and he used to think it was good experience. And I took him down to Buzz FM in Birmingham. He went for an interview, and I think he'd been at Signal and he'd lost his job at Signal, and he went to Buzz. So I took him down there to meet a guy called Chris Carey, and he didn't take that job for some reason. But Chris is a fine example of somebody who said to me on a number of occasions, he goes, "You don't like my style, do you, Carl?" So I said, it's not that I don't like your style. I said, I think your style is great and listeners appreciate you. You know, you're the number one DJ in Britain. So, you know, you're obviously doing something right. I say, but my personal preference is fast-moving music radio. That's what I really like. So it's not correct to say that I don't like what you do. I appreciate what you do, but it's not particularly for me. And I think he appreciated the honesty.
Brilliant, yeah. And also, I forgot to mention as well, he's doing something similar to Stephanie Hurst now on the social media, Chris Miles.
So is he doing a like Steph does the kitchen belters and that kind of thing? Is he doing something like that?
He's doing more DJ sets.
Ah, interesting.
On Instagram Lives.
Yep. I'll have to check out one of those, and definitely.
And his last one was for the England game. He played loads of music an hour before.
Yeah, Chris is, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. You know, he is a talented broadcaster, and he knows that I think he is a talented broadcaster. His comments about saying that, you know, he thought I didn't like his style. I remember distinctly what I said to him. It comes back to me now clearer, but we'd been somewhere else to a gig or something. And I said, well, the reality is, I said, you've been sacked from a few stations now. I said, if you carry on with the style you've got, I said, you will either crash and burn and your career will be finished, or you'll go to the very top and you'll make it. So I said, you have to make the decision as to how you continue with your career and what you feel comfortable doing and what your aims and objectives are. And he carried on with his wild style, and true enough, did amazingly well. So my prediction was right, really. You know, he had to choose exactly whether he would continue with what he was doing or whether he would be a basic jock, because he does enjoy music radio, if that makes sense. You know, he enjoys to listen to music radio and fast-moving jocks, and he also can appreciate the skill in that type of broadcasting, and he understands that it's a skill, but it's something that he didn't want to continue with. He went the way, he saw the path of progression for him in doing his, shall we call it, shock jock style. And as I said to him, you'll either go to the top or you'll crash and burn. And he went to the top, which is great.
Brilliant. Moving on. Question 3. What is your favourite part about being a radio presenter / broadcaster?
My favourite part about being on the radio is the connection you can make with people. It's something that you can say. It kind of goes back to the point that I made about excess verbiage, that you don't have to say a lot to have connected, to have engaged with the listener. It can be the strangest of throwaway comments that can connect with the listener. And I enjoy making those connections that maybe I haven't realized at the time. Okay, I fly by the seat of my pants, if that makes any sense. I'm well known for turning up. It's not something I'm proud of, but I'm well known for turning up 2 minutes before I start a show and just going on and doing it. And I fly by the seat of my pants, and I like it that way. I like... On the other hand, it sounds contradictory, but I do like preparation, and I do like having something set out that I'm going to do. But my preparation is probably about 10% of my show, if that makes any sense. And the rest I make up as I go along. The other 90% is I just make it up as I go along. And I think it's the 90% that I make my connections, and I maybe say something that somebody thinks is funny or amusing. Doesn't have to be hilariously funny, just a throwaway comment. But there is a connection you can make. So that's something that I enjoy to do, and that's something that I get a great buzz out of.
Brilliant. We'll move on to question 4. What is your greatest achievement in your career?
My greatest achievement. Now, this will probably sound very strange, but the first thing I'm going to say is I'm going to give you 2 greatest achievements. I always wanted to work for Radio Caroline. That was my absolute dream. And when Caroline came back in the 80s, that was just so amazing. For a lad from Hull to go and work for Radio Caroline that had millions of listeners, that was just a dream come true. My other greatest achievement was going to Radio 1 for an audition, and Johnny Beerling, the program controller, looking at a wall chart, and he said to me, "It might be that we give you this series of programs, Carl, here, or it might be this one here for these months." And I said the most stupid thing to him. I said, "Does that mean that I'm in the running for a job?" And he said, "Carl, you wouldn't be here if you weren't in the running for a job." And I left, I finished the interview and I came out and I thought, "Oh my God, I think I've got this job. I think I've got a job at Radio 1. Now, had I have got that job, I would not have got to do all the amazing variety of things that I've done now. I've traveled the world, worked for a massive number of radio stations. Had I have gone to Radio 1, I honestly think that I'd still be there now. I'd be at Radio 2. Does that make sense? And I wouldn't have done all the things that I've done. And I'm involved with some other projects now, which are very, very big projects. But I wouldn't have done what I've done had I have got that job at Radio 1. And I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now of having things on the horizon that are very, very big. So I think that was an achievement not to get the job. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And there's also a guy as well, Chris Evans, who's now on Virgin again.
Yeah, Chris Evans is a very good broadcaster. Claim to fame with Chris Evans. Are you ready? Here's a claim to fame. Tim Gibson's company was doing an outside broadcast. They were taking care of technical facilities for a broadcast where Tony Blair was going to be there on the Chris Evans show, and Chris Evans was going to interview him, and they came to borrow. The engineer, a guy called Gary Marshall, he came to my house and he said, he said, "I want Tim to hear the microphone that you use, the broadcast microphone. I'll give you another one to use for all your voiceover sessions and all your work." He said, "But can we borrow your microphone for these broadcasts?" So I said, "Yeah, sure." So they took the microphone off and they took it with them to this outside broadcast. So Chris Evans was talking into my microphone, and so was Tony Blair.
Nice. Have you ever met Chris Evans in person?
No, I haven't. No, never, ever.
Yeah, and also as I say, one of
But he's met my microphone.
Nice. Yeah, and one of my favourite broadcasters, as I say, the person who inspired me was Stephanie Hurst and a little bit of Chris Evans as well when I was younger.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many, many, many talented broadcasters in this country and around the world. And the great thing is that I think the industry needs to have and needs to continue to have a variety of different broadcasters. And I think that it's very important that broadcasters themselves appreciate different styles of broadcasting. Like I mentioned earlier, I certainly don't want everybody to sound like me. In fact, I don't want anybody to sound like me. If people start sounding like me, I won't have a job. So I think individuality is very important. You can have a style, but you have to have within that style, you have to have your own individuality. So I think it's important for broadcasters to have an appreciation of all different styles of broadcasting.
Brilliant. And also as well, before I joined Hull Kingston Radio and before I do my podcast series, my other podcast series that I do now, I got shafted by a couple of other radio stations before I joined Hull Kingston Radio. They wouldn't take me on due to my autism, you see.
Well, that's crazy because, I mean, you do a great job. I'll say that again. Excuse me one sec. Well, I think that's crazy because you do a great job. I've heard, lots of your interviews, and I don't think that there should be any barrier to getting into the industry whatsoever. I just can't understand that. I'm
not going to name the people who didn't give me the chance because some of them could be good friends of yours, so I'm not going to discredit people because we're all different, you see. Absolutely.
I mean, to my level of understanding, autism is just purely that you think differently and you see things differently. That's all it is. And I don't think there should be any discrimination or any reason not to give somebody a job just because they don't think in the same way as thousands of other people. You have individuality, and that is so important.
Yeah, as I say, I'm not allowed to name them people. I'm not going to name them people because I'm not that sort of person who names and shames them.
Which I understand.
And it's called professionalism.
Absolutely.
And as I say, I have a lot of respect for Stephanie Hurst. Me and her if you've listened to my interview with her.
Yes, I have. I did hear it. I've heard quite a few of them, obviously. I heard you did one with Glenn Pinder and various other people, so I've dipped in and out and heard different ones.
Yeah, the Stephanie Hurst one was the most emotional one for me because I used to flick between Viking FM and Capital back in the day when it was Jim Coulson and Rosie Madison on Viking and Hursty, Danny and Jojo on Capital, so I used to just skip between the stations.
Well, now we have on LDC, I don't know if you've heard them, Wes and Leanne. They are very, very good. They do a great show Monday through Friday on LDC in Leeds.
Wes.
And, they're a fun team.
Wes, what's his name?
Wes Stakes.
I know him, because he's quite busy at the moment because he knows lots of other people. Who I know. Yeah, I know him. I thought you were on about Wes Butters there for a second.
No.
Yeah, because he does a show on... he does Drive now on Hits Radio, which is Viking FM, basically.
I think that is one of the... I'll have to cough and you can edit that out. Just one second.
Pete Mills normally does a bit of that.
No problem. I think one of the sad things is that a lot of individuality has gone from radio, and I think the fact that all the stations are owned by the same companies is a real shame.
And so, because Pulse 1's now in Radio Air.
Correct.
And Viking was in Hallam alongside Hallam FM, but due to COVID reasons, because one of their presenters caught COVID, they have to do one one presenter does it from home and one does it from Radio Air opposite Milo and Rosie now.
And that's very sad, actually, that you have 24 hours of broadcasting and most of it is not locally originated. Okay, I'm on stations, in different countries, but I kind of look at it on, from a different perspective. I'm on the radio in Thailand, for example, 3 days a week. So yeah, I'm not there, but it sounds like I'm there. But the problem is that in the United Kingdom, we now have all the stations are owned by just a few companies. And that's when it gets very sad that all the hours are taken up by just syndicated. They're syndicated and they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. The music is the same on every station. And there is there's no room for massive individuality. And also I think it's sad for the industry because, the industry should be a breeding ground for more new broadcasters. That's why it's good that DAB is developing in such a big way. So you have a chance for more stations to go on the air and hopefully offer different programming, as long as the multiplexes are not just taken up by the existing stations that are on the air on FM and they suddenly appear on the multiplexes and there are no spots left for other stations. That would be a great shame.
Yeah, and I was also talking about, as I say, it's a shame now that everything's becoming networked, but it's paving the way for community radio, as I've said before, 100 times before.
Absolutely. The development of community radio is great, and I think that eventually when community stations are allowed to compete on the same level as the big boys, we refer to them as the big boys, when they're allowed to compete exactly on the same level, then I think things will really change. Things will, there's a saying, isn't there? What goes around comes around. So in this country, originally radio stations like Radio 270, Radio Caroline, etc., were the pioneers of free commercial radio. We then got commercial radio. Commercial radio was developing, and then the big boys came in and they, swept up all the stations together, which is a shame because then it creates another monopoly. Like in the old days, the monopoly was the BBC. That was all there was. It was BBC National Radio. There were no BBC local stations. We then got BBC local stations. We then got commercial radio. But if you take away that independence, and if you give licenses to new stations, community stations, but they're not allowed to compete in the same way as they would like to with the bigger stations, if they've got restrictions, not for profit and that kind of thing, then it makes it more complex and more difficult. But yeah, of course, community radio plays a massive part in the radio picture and the radio landscape in this country. Yeah,
and also, as I say, I think somebody made a bold prediction that Stephanie Hayes could end up back on Heart or somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's a phrase, isn't there? Never say never. It's, I could end up on Radio 1 tomorrow, who knows? Never say never. Nothing's impossible.
If I'm honest with you, I'd like her to come back to a station in Hull, because Hull was quite close to her heart.
Absolutely, Hull's a great place. I mean, I'm born and bred. I was born on Chantlands Avenue. In my grandparents' house, I was born in the front room. So I am a Hull lad and very, very proud of it. When people ask me, where am I from? It's Hull, end of story. And I'm always fiercely proud of coming from Hull. And I think it's a great city, and I think people are so friendly from Hull. And of course, we have the nicest girls in Hull as well, because we've got three to every guy. So that's perfect, isn't it?
And also, when my interview with Darren Leatham went out back end of last year, I dedicated it to the late great Bobby Ball, who we interviewed.
Yes, yeah, that was very sad when Bobby Ball passed away. I agree.
And I dedicated the show to him.
Great comedian. Great comedian.
Because our show went out on the Friday, but we recorded it on the Monday, so I had to do a last-minute pre-recorded intro kind of link just for a dedication.
Like a last-minute amendment.
Yeah. And I just said this show's just dedicated to... It said it on Facebook, this show's at my request is dedicated to Bobby Ball.
Excellent.
Yeah, because it was a last-minute dedication, because we didn't know, obviously, he died until 24 hours before the broadcast.
Yes, you updated things, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, as I say, and if ever... Because you can tell that me and Stephanie Hurst had a good friendship in our interview. Good rapport.
Yeah.
And if ever I met her, honestly, I'd give her a hug and say I respect you quite a lot, if I'm honest with you.
Well, I normally see Stephanie when I'm back in the UK. I normally always, meet up with Stephanie. In fact, a group of us normally, meet up. And we go out for a curry or something like that. Milo comes and... various people, there's a long list of names I could mention, but we all, Chris Johnson, people like that, we all get to meet up, and that's always great.
I also was speaking to a friend. I was also Stephanie Hurst last month went down to see James Will and his new fiancée. They went out for a dinner at one time and with James Will and his new fiancée.
Very nice.
Have you ever been out for a drink with James Whale before?
No, but James did come one time to my house to do his show from my studio at my house for Talk Radio, Talk Sport. In fact, I didn't mention, I actually did a feature for Talk Sport. I know nothing about sport, but I got asked to do a rugby feature. So I went with Glenn Pinder, actually. We went to... the Castleford and Wakefield ground. It was something to do about, they were talking about amalgamating Castleford and Wakefield, and we had to interview, or I had to interview, it was my feature. Glenn held the mic, and I had to do this interview. And I sold this interview to Talk Sport, so I'm very proud of that. So I've been on Talk Sport, and I know nothing about sport.
Because Glenn obviously knows a lot about rugby.
Yeah, Glenn's a big rugby fan.
Did he help you at all with that knowledge?
Yeah, I think he gave me a couple of questions or a couple of pointers, I think I said to him, like I say, I'm known for flying by the seat of my pants. So I think about 2 minutes before I had to do the interview, I said, what would you ask him then, Glenn? What's some, yeah, okay, yeah. And then he mentioned a couple of things, and I just devised my own questions from a couple of words, something he'd said. It made me think, I'll ask this question then.
Yeah, as I say, James Whale, brilliant broadcaster as well. You look at him and what he's been through over the last few years, and you now look at him and he's stronger than ever.
Absolutely. Very, very talented broadcaster and a very nice guy. I mean, he comes across with this persona of, being very aggressive and very, very confrontational. But as a person, he's a lovely guy. He's a very genuine person. Nice guy to spend time with, chatting, etc.
He also has a hot tub at his house.
Very nice too. Probably with about 7... Oh no, he has a girlfriend now, so I can't say that.
Yeah, he does, because he misses his wife. Have you ever met his wife? His late
Yes,
wife?
I did meet his
W.
late wife, Melissa.
Yeah, she actually said in the interview that Stephanie Hurst looked lovely after her thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you talking about James's first wife? He's not married again, is he?
No, he's engaged.
Yes, he's engaged. Yeah, that's right. Just clarifying things. But yeah, I did meet James's late wife, Melissa.
And he said as well that he said as well that he used to him and his wife came up, as you said, to visit Peter Tate a few times in his final few months.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter had many, many, many visitors.
Yeah.
Hey, Ben, Pete Mills is going to have a lot of editing to do if we carry on talking.
Yeah, sorry. And Yeah, and that story in the interview made me cry a bit about Peter Tate.
Yeah, it's very sad. Very sad.
Last question. What
Yep.
advice would you give to young, aspiring broadcasters who are starting out?
So the advice I would give to young broadcasters starting out now, and that is be yourself. Learn. I think one of the things I always I did some jock training at Radio Air, jock training as we call it. And one of the things I would always say is, for most people, learn the basics first. Learn how to work the panel properly, become comfortable with that, learn how to get your station IDs, make sure you say the name of the station. We're in a marketing game. Name of the station, the priority things that you have to do every time you do a link. Learn that, because those are the nuts and the bolts around how you will interject your personality and interject more of you. So, don't go in all guns blazing without having perfected the basics. The basics are so important. And it's like building bricks. The basics and the building bricks that you work hard on, you'll be rewarded later, because you'll find everything else so easy to add on and to put your stamp on.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us, Carl.
You're very welcome, and good luck with your career as well, Ben. And lots of interviews in the future. We'll be listening.
And hopefully, when I do my Radio Legends series, hopefully you may come back on and divulge with us some more radio.
Absolutely, I've got a few stories to tell, I'm
stories.
Sure.
And radio. Were you at Luxembourg?
No, never at Luxembourg. But I am starting one show a week with I'm sure you heard United DJs, UDJ, that was on the air, which was mostly ex-Luxembourg people. I was invited to join that a long time ago, and of course it closed down recently. But a number of the people that were with UDJ are starting a new station called Sunshine Radio. So I've agreed to do one show a week for them. So I will be working with a number of ex-Radio Luxembourg people. So that will be
one of my friends as well, Paul Newman, was on United DJs.
Yeah, I know Paul very well. Excellent broadcaster. Excellent.
And he was only on Nation till a few weeks ago.
Absolutely.
Until he got
Nation,
dropped.
one second. I'll cough and do the link again. You mentioned Nation Radio, and Nation Radio came. I was with Nation in, was it Barbados or Jamaica? I forget now. And also in Switzerland for some broadcasts. And there was a chance that I would do some work for Nation in London, and the timing wasn't right for me. I was doing some other stuff, and I kind of didn't get to do that deal. But Nation's a very good group, and I would like to work for them. I'd never discount anything.
Well, I know Neil Fox, and he does the breakfast show from his shed.
Cool.
He does the breakfast show from his shed in Fulham region.
Yeah, Neil Fox, a very, very talented broadcaster, always enjoyed. I can distinctly always remember travelling down to the Superstation in London. I was on a coach. I would go different ways according to the times that either the train would get me there, or if I drove, or if I took a coach, how much recording I had to do. And I can remember one summertime going down with the coach, and Neil Fox was on Capital in the afternoon. And it was a beautiful day, and he just sounded so fantastic.
Yep, and that's brilliant. That's it for today. Carl, thank you for joining us here on Hull Kingston Radio 107.4 FM. And that's it for today for you guys as well. Thank you very much for watching, and now please give it up for one final time for the legendary God of Radio, Carl Kingston.
Thank you, Ben.
Do join me again soon for another podcast, but for now, as I always say, that's a wrap.
That's a good one. Nice chatting. It must be cup of tea time.
that was my interview with the legendary Kingston. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it filled the time in your gap. I'll be uploading my interview with Neil Velger later on tonight. But for now, thanks very much for watching. And that's a wrap.